All right. Let's get things going. Today, just going to build a full stack Next.js application using the latest version of Next, Prisma, Postgres, Vercel. We're going to deploy it using Better Off. It's going to be something that we'll use personally. So I'm just going to keep it simple and add in additional features as we go. Everything I'm going to do online so you can see how I build it and see the thought process behind it. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time to explain all of the how-tos. Feel free to follow along. I'll keep everything high level, explain some concepts along the way, but for the most part, we're just coding, having a good time, getting something out on the web that we can use and eventually others as well too. So with that said, let's go ahead and install the latest version of a Next.js app. Next app, latest, space and dots. And yeah, we'll be using the recommended defaults for the project, and just give it a few minutes to finish the setup. We'll be ready to get things off. Like I said, we'll be using Postgres via Neon Vercel, Prisma as the ORM, Better Off for security, and we'll just use the social login for now. And give a few minutes to finish the setup. We'll use Daisy UI to help with styling. I'm not going to use Shadcn for this one. Of course, we'll use Tailwind CSS to make our lives a little easier, but in this portion, I'm not going to be too concerned with the aesthetics of it just yet. More so concerned with getting the project up, getting something online, making sure that we can log in, log out with authentication, and then we'll take care of all of the CRUD capabilities at that point. But for right now, let's just get this project set up. All right. Close this out for now. Trying to remove this. All right, and we can remove this. I'll add a div tag, homepage, save it. Let's update the global CSS. Just remove this. We'll go body, HTML, .app. I'm sorry, let's do root, .app. Set the height to 100%, the width to 100%. I think it is, we'll just do the text sizing as text. Now let's add apply text small. There we go. Close that out. Let's go ahead and kick it off on our local server, npm run dev. Launch this on localhost 3000. And it looks like we are up and going. Let me do overflow on the X. Cool. There we go. Yeah, that should be fine for right now. All right, let's do Daisy UI next. Okay, to help us out with styling so we don't have to do so much raw code and still get a little interactivity, keeping everything as much server side as possible. Docs, Install. Copy this. Let's put this here. Install at latest. If everyone's doing okay out there, just building a simple habit tracker that we're going to use for our personal use. So we'll deploy it and all of that good stuff. Set up rate limiting and maybe even add a paid portion. But for right now, let's just get the app up and going. And since I have a few days off, we are going to take advantage of that. And then we'll add the plugin. And come back. All right, let's make sure this works. Here, and we'll just go with button. Let's grab the JSX, copy it, back here, close this out, paste it in, perfect. So we see Daisy UI is up and working. Okay. All right, so let's roll with Prisma. This is it. So we need to log in, make sure I have a available. Let's remove this one. Let's go with delete. Project name is, let's type it in, my CRUD app. Delete it, perfect, we already logged in. Close this one, use this one. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and set up Prisma in the project. So how to use Prisma ORM in the Prisma Postgres Next.js. How to use Prisma ORM and Prisma Postgres with Next.js. So the documentation states this guy's going to show us how to use the Prisma with Next.js, which is a full stack React framework, if you weren't aware. With this, you'll learn how to create a Prisma Postgres instance, set up the Prisma ORM in Next.js, and handle migrations and deploy your application to Vercel. So we're going to do all of that now. So we've already set up the project. And for the reference, the defaults do include TypeScript, SLint, Tailwind, no source, the app router, the turbo pack, and no custom import A-list. That's the default settings that we went with for the project. So we'll start by installing the Prisma TSX and Types PG. We're going to copy this. We'll go ahead and just stop the server from running for right now. Paste in that command. Give it a few minutes to finish the setup. And while that's going, I'll go ahead and copy the next command. Paste that in and install it now. Excellent. If you're using a different database provider, MySQL, SQL Server, SQLite, install the corresponding driver. We're using one of these, so we don't have to worry about installing it. But once we've installed these dependencies, we'll then need to initialize Prisma in the project. So we'll just copy this command, paste it into the terminal. We'll need to answer a few questions while setting up our Prisma Postgres database. We'll start by selecting the region that's closest to us. Then we'll be asked to name the project. I'm just going to name it Habit Tracker. And prod for production. Once it's complete, it should create a Prisma directory with a schema.prisma file, the prisma.config.ts file, Prisma Postgres database, and a .env file containing the database URL at the project's root. So let's just check for that. I'll close this out for now. We have our Prisma schema.prisma file. This is where we will add the models to organize our data. The .env file where we'll paste the environment variable that will establish the connection to our Vercel Postgres database. The Then we have the prisma.config.ts file. It imported .env. So we are good from here. So at this point, I think I'll go ahead and set up the Vercel database and add it into the project. So go to vercel.com. We'll go to storage. We'll create a database. We'll be using Neon Serverless Postgres. We'll select the region that is closest to us. It should be there by default. We'll click continue. Now let's just name it. So I'm gonna name it Habit Tracker Prod for production. Click create. And just like that, we now have a Neon Postgres database. We'll click done. Under the .env.local tab, we'll just click copy snippet to copy the environment variables. We'll head back to terminal, head back to the text editor, remove that, paste in those variables, close it out, And at this point, we are actually done with Vercel. We'll close this next. So it didn't generate the output directory just yet. Yep, it mentions it right here. The app generated Prisma directory output directory. The output directory for the generated Prisma client will be created when we run the Prisma generate or Prisma migrate dev. So before then, we'll just need to set up a schema that we can push for the migrations. So just to have something simple to test this out, we'll go to the schema.prisma file. We are going to set this up. For this, let's just add something simple. We'll go with a model. We'll name it habits. And we'll give it an ID as a string. Clean this up a little bit. And for simplicity purposes, it'll have a title, which will be a string. Let's store when it was created at, which we'll use the date time from Prisma default now. And we'll capture updated at, date time, at, updated app. We'll click save. We will use this to establish a relationship later between the user and the habit. But for right now, this will be suffice. The user will be identified from the logged in user, which will be using better off to capture a logged in user. We already confirmed that the .env/config is already imported. Now we just need to run the migrations to push the changes that we've made or updates that we made to the Prisma, to the Vercel Neon Postgres database. So we'll go back to the terminal, run npx Prisma migrate dev, and I'm just going to keep the name init. Then we'll run npx Prisma generate. All right, let's test this out. I'm not going to worry about seeding the database. That is a connection configuration string that we'll come back to in a moment. Let's run the command npx Prisma Studio to launch the Prisma Studio to confirm these changes did take place. And these migrations have been implemented to the database. So we'll run this command. It should be launched on localhost 512.12. Copy this, paste it in, and actually close this out. And in the Prisma Studio, you see we have the table named habit with the ID as a string, which will be text, created at, timestamp, title, text, updated at. So perfect. Those migrations did take place. Let's go ahead and insert a row to test this out. I'll give this say ID as a text of 1. The timestamp will set to now. Save changes. Test from studio. Save the changes. Click save. It wants to update that. I didn't think it needed that. All right, so the rows have been successfully inserted. All right, so let's go ahead and run npm run dev. Npm run dev. Minimize this. We'll refresh that. I don't think we need to do anything else. Oh, set up the Prisma client so that we can access it and run it throughout the app. So let's create a directory, name lib, add a file named prisma.ts. I'm just going to add in this code, which is basically bringing in the Prisma client, which is now the output for it is inside of the app directory / generated Prisma client, which you can find here. It's the path for it. And then we're bringing in Prisma PG. And basically what this function is doing is establishing a database connection if one is not already there. If there is one there, it's going to gain access to it. Excuse me, it's also going to give us access to the Prisma client throughout the project so that we can access the models within our schema.prisma file, in addition to the methods that will allow us to query and mutate the data inside of the database. So with this, we should be able to go back to our local host, run a quick query, and see what is inside of our database to confirm we have a connection. So in the page.tsx, let's update this to export default async function. And we'll go const habits is equal to await Prisma. And I'm using the IntelliSense from VS Code, which automatically pulled it in from @lib/prisma. We'll use dot, and we want the model habit, which is in the schema.prisma file. And then we'll do dot, and we'll use the find many method to get access to all of the habits within the database. And we'll just run a little bit of JavaScript. We'll go, no, this should be habits. Yeah, habits.map. And we'll give it a key of habits.id. Just to make sure that it works, we'll go habit.title. And notice the IntelliSense is coming up, which is a fantastic sign. .title, click save, and we see test from the studio. It looks like it automatically saved it as a string. I couldn't remember. But you see it has the quotations there saved it as a string, so that's perfect. It appears that that is working perfectly as we intended. So we have a connection established between our Next.js project and our Postgres Neon database via Vercel, and we're using Prisma as the ORM. So we know that we can get habits from the database. Let's work on creating them next. Hope everyone is doing well. Thank you so much for stopping by. Feel free to drop a like or comment or a question or anything that you may have. Basically, we're just building a Fullstack app. It will be a habit tracker, a personal one, and we're going to treat this as if we are deploying it and looking to monetize it at some point. But for right now, we just want to make sure that it works. So if you got any questions or anything, I'll be happy to answer them on this beautiful Friday morning. Enjoying a little bit of time off from work. Figured I'll take advantage of it and do some coding. But we are using Next.js, Prisma as the ORM, Vercel, Neon, Postgres database. All right, so let's go ahead and add the ability. Let's go ahead and now that we have the ability to get habits from the database, let's focus on having the ability to add habits from the Next.js application directly into the database and confirm that we can display them on screen. So we'll start with adding a directory inside of the lib folder named action. This is where we're going to store all of our server actions. The first directory that we'll store will be called habit. We'll go ahead and add a directory named user as well. But for right now, inside of habit, we'll just name a file named habitaction.ts. At the top of this file, we'll mark it as use server, as this will be a server-side rendered file and we'll be able to have access throughout the application, even in a client-side component. We'll then need to bring in Prisma. And this should come from @/lib/Prisma. This is going to give us access to the Prisma. Then we'll bring in revalidate path coming from next cache. I think we got to remove that from, we'll come back to it. We'll also bring in redirect. This is going to come from next navigation. So we need to make an asynchronous request to the database in order to create a habit inside of the actual database itself. So we'll go export async function. We'll name this create habit. We'll add a try catch block inside of it, but we know we need to pass in some information inside of this. So what we'll be passing in is form data, because that's what we are going to be capturing from the front end. And we're just going to use the form data object. And to care for TypeScript, we'll need to add a promise. And we'll set that to void. And then inside of the try catch, let's start with the const name title, and we'll set it equal to form data.get. We'll be looking for title, and this should be string. I don't think we need it, but we'll just include it just in case. And some quick validations, we'll just say if the type of does not, I'm sorry, if the type of title does not equal a string, or title dot trim, meaning that we get something blank. If we get an empty string back, then we want to throw a new error, invalid habit title. It shouldn't be no, that should be if the type of. So we'll start by some simple validations to say if the type of does not, if the type does not, if the type of title does not equal a string or it's blank, we're going to say that this is an invalid title. And we'll come back and add Zod later on for some validations, but we just want to get this up and going first. And if all goes well with it, we'll say await Prisma. And we want to bring this in from @/lib/Prisma. We'll use the client to get access to the habit model, and we'll be using the create method. And what we'll be passing in is data. And of course, we'll pass the title that we just extracted from the form data object. With that, everything should go through successfully. But if it doesn't, we get an error message. We'll log it to the console. We'll say error creating habits. And we certainly want to see that error. But if all goes well, we're going to use revalidate path to validate the data. I'm not going to worry about redirect right now. We don't necessarily need that refresh. But with this, we now have a function, so we can remove it. We'll redirect later. With this, we have a function in place that allow us to create a habit using Prisma. We're basically passing in the form data inside of this function. We'll have a try catch block to extract the title from the form data, and it should be named title. If we don't get a string from the title or it is blank, we're going to throw an error to the user. Otherwise, we'll use the Prisma client to get access to the model, then the .create method to create a habit based on the title. If something goes array, we're going to throw the error, log it to the console, and we'll be able to dissect it from there. Otherwise, we're just going to revalidate the data on the server to make sure that it works. So with that, let's go ahead and close out the schema.prisma file and use that function within the page.tsx. All right, so underneath those habits, just for simplicity, just add a H1. We'll just say new habits, HABIT. We'll add another div with a form, have an input. We'll give this a class name of input. Let's make it so we can see what we have. Save it. Okay. So we see we get a nice little input there. Let's give some padding on the X. There we go. We'll give this a placeholder. Placeholder title. Okay. And this should have a name of title. I'm gonna give it an ID as well of title. Hit save, and then the form will also need a button. Save. And we'll give it a class name of BTN. Is it full? pt1 medium maybe. I'll worry about that later. That's not a big deal right now. Big thing is next we need to pass in the action inside of the form. So let's go ahead and import that function we just created. Import create habit, and be sure it's coming from @lib/action/habit, which is where we're storing that function. And all we need to do is pass the action method inside of the form element, and then just pass that function that we just created, create habit. Click save. Now to test this out, we should be able to a little bit of separation. Now, what should happen is we should be able to enter a title, click save, and that should now appear in the list right beneath test from studio. Let's test it out. From clients. There we go. Now let's just check the Prisma Studio. There we go. We refreshed it, and now you see we have a ID generated as a text. We have the created at timestamp, the title of new habit from client, and the updated timestamp as well. So we have the ability to create and get habits from the database. The last thing, or the next thing, in order to have the full CRUD functionality will be to update and delete. So let's work on that next. let's get the ability to update and delete. So I think it make the most sense as we loop over it. Title and div. Let's put this as update. This one as delete. Okay, and let's clean this up a little bit. So class name, flex, item centered, space on the X of 1. Okay, that'll work. Let's see what would be the easier way to do this. All right. So I think the easier way to do this would be to, do we want to make this a model or make this clickable? This, I think it'd be easier just to make that clickable. So let's do this. For each of those, let's render a form. The input, so class name, input. Let's give this a default value of habit.title. Okay. And then we can just add update. Let's add update. Let's go type submit. And then outside of that one, we can add a div. This will be a form too. Form. The button can say delete. We'll go type of submit. Let's just make sure this works. Input, let's close it off. Let's give it a default value of habits.id. Perfect. But we'll make this hidden. There we go. And okay, cool. That'll work. All right, so now let's create the action that will give us the ability to update the inputs. So input small. That looks a little better. All right, so let's create the function so that we can have the ability to update in the action habit directory a file name update habit action.ts. We'll start with use server. We'll bring in Prisma. And this is going to come from @lib/lib/Prisma. And we'll bring in revalidate path. And we'll create a export async function named update habit. We'll need a try catch block. We're going to pass in form data and get access to the form data object. We'll include the promise as void. Inside of the try, we'll have a const of ID, set it equal to form data dot get ID. That way we can uniquely identify the habit. Then we'll get a const named title and set it equal to form data dot get title. In the event we need to update or change the name of the title. And for some reason, if the type of the ID does not equal a string, or that ID is blank, then we'll need to throw a new error indicating that we have an invalid habit ID. And we'll do the same thing for the title. So we'll say if type of title does not equal a string, or the title.trim if it equals a blank string, then we'll throw a new error indicating that we have an invalid title input. This is just some simple validation. We'll create a const named existing habit because we're ready to look up the habit. This means that we got a valid ID and we got a valid title. So we'll create a const named existing habit and set it equal to await Prisma dot habit, and we'll want to find a unique, not find. And this is going to be where the ID is equal to it. Looks like I'm off on my import. Sorry about that. It's pretty strange. So this update that I guess I had it typed in. Oh, I see I destructured it, didn't need to. Sorry about that. So once we found it, let's validate it. If there's no existing habit, we'll go throw new error. Habit not found. Otherwise, we'll go await Prisma.habit.update. And we're going to be updating where the ID matches and the data that we're looking for is title. If we get an error, we'll log it to the console. If we get an error, we'll log it to the console. Otherwise, we will revalidate the path to make sure we have the most up-to-date information. So let's just save this and import this function and test it out. Page to TSX, import it. PORT, update habit, and then let's just pass it inside of the form. Action, update habit, click save and test it out. I'll remove the string. Oh no, I passed it into the wrong one. I just realized that. So now let's pass that action. Let's give this form element of action and pass in the update habit function. So if we click on this, let's just give this a class name so we can see it a little better. There. Remove that. Click update. Let's remove this. We'll need to pass the ID as well. Just realized that. So we'll go input, default value, habit.id. Save. We do see it. Let's go with hidden to hide this. All right, now let's test it out. So as you just seen, we were getting the invalid ID. That is because although we're passing the ID, we need to distinguish that this is the ID. So we'll just give this a name of ID and an ID of ID. Click save. Now let's test it out. We'll just remove the string or the quotation, excuse me. Update it. Click on update. And as you notice, I updated the input with the appropriate name, but I didn't update the title input with the appropriate name. So let's add that now. That way it knows. So we'll give it a name of title and an ID of title. Click save. Now let's test it out. We'll remove the quotations and just go update it. Click save. And then now you see test from studio updated. Let's click refresh. We'll go to our Prisma Studio. We'll refresh this. And now if we take a look at it, we see test from studio updated, and it no longer has the quotation strings. So we have the ability to update habits, create habits, and get all habits. Now we just need to add the ability to delete a habit. Let's work on that now. with the ability to create, update, and get our habits in place, the last step will be to add the ability to delete habits. So we'll follow the same pattern for consistency. In the action directory inside of the habit folder, let's create a file named delete habit action.ts. We'll begin by marking the file as use server. We'll go ahead and bring in Prisma from @/lib/Prisma. And we'll also bring in revalidate path to revalidate the data. We'll create an export async function that we would name delete habit. We'll include a try catch. We'll follow the same pattern. This will receive form data from the form data object. Let's say promise avoid. We'll first need to capture the ID, which will come from the form data. We'll say if the type of does not equal a string or the ID dot trim. If it is blank, we're going to return a new error. Valid habit ID. And we'll just go await prisma dot habit dot delete. And we'll delete where the ID, that's the unique habit that we're looking for. And that's all that we basically need for that. If we get an error, we'll log it to the console. Error deleting habit. And of course, we'll need the error. And if all goes well, we'll just revalidate the path so we're getting the most up-to-date information from the server. So now with this function, we have the ability to delete a habit. Now we just need to pass it into a form action so that we can get access to it. In the page.tsx, let's go ahead and bring this in. Inside of this form, we'll add a action. This will be delete habit. Let's remove hidden. You can see we are passing in the ID, so that's perfect. Let's go ahead and name this input ID so that it knows this is where to get the ID from. Now all we need to do is click the delete button, and that should automatically remove the habit from the list with no page refreshing, and it should update in the UI and the server. Let's test it out. And we see that there's nothing there, so it is gone. We refresh the screen, it is gone. Let's check the local host. Heading back into the Prisma Studio, we see that we currently have no habits inside of the Prisma Studio, so it has been removed from the database. Let's test this out by adding a couple more. We'll go second habit from UI. You see that on screen. Actually, we can change the view. All right, so let's test this out. So we'll add a new habit. We'll name it second habit from UI. We'll click save. We see it immediately appears in the list. Let's try to update it. We'll just go updates, update, refresh the page. We see that it still reads updates. If we click delete, we see that it removes the habit from the list. So with that, we have a full stack CRUD application using the latest version of Next.js, Prisma as the ORM, and a Postgres Neon database. This can be the foundation to any application that you're looking to build from a full stack perspective. We just chose to use Prisma and to create a simple CRUD habit tracker, but this could be anything from a blog post app to a personal tracking application, whatever it is that you could think of. This is pretty much the foundation to get you started. So in today's video, we're building a simple full stack Next.js application using its latest version, Prisma as the ORM and Postgres Neon as the database. This could be the foundation to any full stack application that you can imagine. All you need to do is continue to add additional fields to the model, make the migrations, push those changes, test it out, update your server actions, and you'll have the ability to make those CRUD changes. But just to do a quick demo to show you what we'll be building on screen, what we have is a simple UI that shows the list of current habits in the database, and we have an input field to add a new habit. If we want to add a new habit, we'll say new habit added. We'll click save. Notice that it immediately appears inside of the UI with no page refreshing. That's because we're using revalidate path from Next.js and server actions so that we can immediately update the information from the server. In the event that we want to make changes to this title, all we need to do is type inside of the input field, make the changes that we request, click the update button, and notice that we don't get any refreshes or anything, but if we refresh the page, we'll currently see that we have the updated change to the habit title. And just to confirm that this did take place, we'll go to the Prisma Studio, refresh it. If we look inside of our tables, we'll see that we now have two habits. And as we scroll over, we see the title of the new habit that we just added with updated changes. And the last step that we'll need to confirm inside of this application is that we have the ability to delete a habit. We'll just simply click on the delete button, and then you notice that the habit is no longer in the list. No page refreshes. Again, this is being powered by the latest version of Next.js using revalidate path from Next cache so that we don't have any page refreshes and we're getting the most up-to-date data from the server. So if you're looking for a simple full stack Next.js application using Prisma, Postgres, Neon, and the latest version of Next, this is going to be the perfect starter application for you. Hey, I'm doing pretty good. How you doing? I appreciate everyone stopping by. Just coding a little simple full stack CRUD app, and then eventually we're going to add more to it. But for right now, I want to kind of talk through how I got here and where we're going and things that you want to consider when you are building applications for yourself. But give me just a moment. We are going to jump in and kind of talk through that here in just a second. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Enjoying the day off from work, trying to take advantage of it, do a little bit of coding, work on some stuff for myself, the content, all that good stuff, things I enjoy to do. How about yourself? I appreciate everyone showing support in the chat. It means a lot. And if there are any questions that I can answer, look, don't hesitate to ask. I'll be happy to jump in and answer those. And if not, we can find out the answer together if I don't happen to know them. So, but thank you for showing the support. It is genuinely appreciated. Doing pretty good. Yep. Um, I've been wanting to, in the beginning of the year, I always got these new things you want to do and goals that you set. So I figured it'd be pretty cool to kind of build a simple little habit tracker, if you will, to keep track of everything that I set out to do and make sure I'm holding myself accountable to doing it. And I'm going to spend some time and kind of walk through building this as I would build a production application with authentication, authorization, rate limiting, error management, all of that good stuff. And kind of talk about some of the trade-offs along the way of doing A, B, and C will lead to X, Y, and Z, et cetera, et cetera. So things that you have to think through as you're building an application and some trade-offs you have to make. Yep, that is the game plan for today. So before, and I know I already have a application built, we'll kind of walk through that. But before we just kind of jump straight into code, I want to take a few minutes and kind of plan out what it is that we're doing, right? So I know the first thing that we do anytime we get a new idea, we may make a couple notes or just have a soft vision of what it is that we want to do, but we immediately want to jump into code. And that's not always the best or most efficient thing to do because you find yourself making changes and so many changes along the way to the point where you may have to scrap the entire idea, start over because you made a decision early on in the build that doesn't help with the new vision or the roadmap on where you ultimately want to go. So the first thing you kind of always want to do is sit down and plan out what it is that you ultimately want to get accomplished. So anytime you're building a application, you're always going to have to make decisions. Decission. Did I spell that correctly? Yeah. You're always going to have to make decisions because, yes, you're going to be able to do some basic coding, have a little bit of fun, all of that good stuff. But as the application grows and complexity starts to get introduced, number one thing is it's always about decisions because based upon the decisions that you make is going to ultimately determine the experience that your user will have when using the application. And it also, more importantly, is going to impact your development experience, which impacts the user. So you kind of want to take some time out and have some idea of what it is that you want to build, some of those initial decisions that have to get made, and what are the trade-offs when you make those decisions. That's what's going to drive the application more than anything else, to be honest with you. So you may be wondering, why does this even matter? So a lot of times we think that coding is strictly about typing, writing code out, syntax, making sure things flow, being modular. And yes, that is a big part of coding, typing. But You also want to make sure that you have clarity in your projects. You have a clear, concise direction of where it is that you want to go. Because a lot of times your project may not necessarily stall or fail because of the syntax, but ultimately it could fall apart because you didn't plan the data, you didn't organize the data, you didn't define behavior, didn't define responsibility, didn't think about the user, what the end user experience would be, and also didn't have a clear design of how the project should actually flow. And without those clear directions and clear understanding of what it is that you're looking to get it done, ultimately, this is what's going to lead to that project failing, not getting finished, and ultimately being something else that you just stopped and restarted because you didn't take the time to plan out what it is that you ultimately want to do. So, decisions are extremely important, and you really have to take your time with them and making sure that you're thinking them through. Again, if you're building something small and you're just getting started, those decisions aren't going to be as impactful as someone that's looking to build something large scale or looking to build something for a potential client where decision making is extremely important. So, with that being said, what I want to do in this portion of the video is I want to walk you through how to actually design a application, and I'm using the habit tracker as a example. We're going to talk about the users, the authentication, the data modeling, the behavior, and the real logic behind that, and how we're going to bring everything to life, and also consider some things at scale once we have this project where we want to be at from a getting off the ground, getting things going perspective. Then in the next segments, we're going to think more about how we're going to bring it to life even more. We'll start by reviewing the application on what we already have. We'll get it deployed to the web. Then we're going to look to bring in what exactly that we're bringing, maybe adding authentication, authorization, and how that impacts the overall thought process of the build for this app. So what are we building? Honestly, this is just a simple CRUD app. Everything is a CRUD application. That's where everything starts. Create, read, update, delete. But I don't want you to think about this in terms of just a CRUD application. I want you to think about this in terms of being a system, right? Maybe wondering why I want you to think in terms of a system, because if you think of just a CRUD application, your scope, your vision is a little too narrow when it's time for the application to scale, to grow, to introduce complexity, features, etc. You kind of want to think about the overall system of what it is that you ultimately want, and then dissect it into smaller parts in order to get there. So think about it as something that's going to be tied to behavior of the app. What do you expect? You want to tie this application to an identity. Who is this application for? What exactly is it going to be used? Who's going to be using it? Actual real people, not just an application for you or just for someone else. You want to actually have real people using this application. So, like I said, you want to think about this in terms of a system. So, the first real question you're going to ask is, who specifically is this application for? The answer is a real user, someone that you may not know, someone that is going to trust you and try out your application. And if they're still trusting you, you have to deliver on a safe, secure, good experience product. So if the answer is a real user, that means you're going to have some form of a login. You're going to have personal progress. You're going to have data that actually matters to that user in order for them to continue to use it, continue to come back, and more importantly, suggest to others that this is a good website slash application for them to use. And then now you're starting to create a little bit of momentum by having users that had a good experience that are willing to market and share the experience of your product. So what this is going to mean is that as you're building this application, there are some things that are going to be a non-negotiable. Authentication isn't going to be an option. Authentication won't be optional. We have to make sure we have authentication. That's the only way we're going to be able to securely identify our user. The user identity is not optional. You can always ask the user to type in their information and continue to do so, but you want to have a way to persist that data inside of the database, tie it to a user, and have that user come back and see that same data in different forms and used in different mechanisms throughout the application. So having that user identity or asking the user to actually log in and identify themselves, that's something that you actually want to have in the app. The next thing is data ownership. You want to be able to tie the user to data. That way, when that user logs back in or returns at a later date, they'll be able to see what they've already entered, pick up where they left off, and kind of measure their success or whatever it is that they want to measure based upon the data that they've already entered. If you don't tie that user to it, if you don't tie the user to data, when they come back to the website, their data that they've already entered and what they thought has been saved won't be matched to their user instance, and no one else will be able to, excuse me, and they won't be able to actually see the data, update it, manipulate it, and kind of measure their success over time. And with this application as a habit tracker, that's something that's going to be extremely important. So we want to make sure we have the relationship between a user and a habit. So because of this, and this being something that we want to introduce to production and ask other users to try out and give us feedback, we got to make sure that we secure the application, we tie the user to the data, and the data is always there whenever that user visits the website or the app, whichever one they decide to go with. That way they know that relationship is maintained and it's something that they can trust, and they'll be willing to use it over and over again. So, because we're building an actual real application, we need to make sure that we implement authentication in a secure fashion in a way that a user will actually trust. Sure, we can always write authentication from scratch, but that's not always the best approach. It's suggested or recommended to leverage some of the social login providers that already exist because they have teams that are in place to make sure that data remains secure versus us trying to write this ourselves using cookies and all of that good stuff. It's best to allow the experts to take care of this. We tap into their APIs, implement it into our project, make sure that it works, and then extend it to the user. All right. So now that I said authentication is going to be a must, what's the first thing that you thought of when I mentioned that? You may just be thinking that, hey, I can go to Better Off or Clerk and implement that into the project. And you're right. You can have authentication with that approach and it'll work just fine. But you kind of want to have something a little bit more to the project so that it gives the user the experience that you're looking for or that they're looking for, excuse me, but you're also getting a result back from the project that you ultimately want to have. You see, this is a very important step because without the user being tied to the data, you kind of don't have a tracker or any way to manage and keep up with the data as you would expect anytime you have a habit tracker. If this was just a personal project, it wouldn't matter because users wouldn't have access to it unless they just happen to stumble upon your website. But because we're looking to share this with multiple users and scale and grow this to something much more significant, these are the foundational steps that we want to implement in the beginning to make sure that we're getting the experience that we're looking for. Because when we add it, that's going to say that, hey, these are my habits, these are my streaks, these are my comments, these are my habits that are being implemented and shared in the application. We always want to make sure that we maintain that relationship to a habit and a user. We don't want to allow anyone to create a habit without it being associated with the user. So when we bring in authentication later on, we're not just installing the library that we're going to go with, whether it's Clerk, Better Off, or some other form of authentication. We're we're going to be saying that our application has the ability to remember you. This is how you're going to log in, and your progress is going to be just yours alone. You don't have to worry about sharing it or it bleeding over with anyone else. Ultimately, this application, this website is going to respect your journey and treat your data and your identity with care. And the only thing that'll be shared with others is things that you want to be shared. The app will provide a specific individual user experience. So as I mentioned, for this application, we're going to be using Better Off to kind of help us out with managing and implementing or managing the user experience and providing a level of security throughout the app. As we get a little bit further into that, and once we brought it in, we're going to talk about data modeling and how it's important with the application and how we want to model the data so that we have the user habit relationship and we're allowing the application to scale once we want to add additional features and additional methods and items to the habit and to the user so that we maintain that relationship. Uh, Absolutely. Yeah, so that's why data modeling is extremely important. And anytime you consider data modeling, you kind of want to think about who all is going to be using it, what data are you looking to manage, and what relationship you want to have between the different models. So with this, you know that we're going to start with at least a user, a habit, and a habit record. A habit record is going to say what's complete and what's not, and we want to be able to store that so the user can historically see what they've captured, and we'll be able to measure progress over a period of time. So think about it as a user can have a relationship with multiple habits. A habit can only belong to one user, and a user can have many completion logs that says, "Hey, I've completed all of these habits," but all of them are going to be associated with that one user. You don't want any user to be able to, number one, gain access to your application without you knowing who it is, and number two, you certainly don't want them to be able to create a habit without it being associated with the user, because without that relationship, that user can just enter a habit, step away from the website, refresh it, whatever, come back to it, and that habit may not be there because there technically wasn't a relationship between the identified user and the new record that's been entered into the database. So that's why it's extremely important to make sure that you have that. Oh yeah. Yeah, I've learned quite a few lessons along the way. So, you always want to make sure that you start with the structure and the foundation of the app. And there are several ideas and features that I ultimately want to add that's going to enhance my experience and ultimately the user's experience. But the first thing you always want to start with is your data modeling to make sure that you're capturing the data that you're looking for and that your application functions the way you intend for it to actually function. So like I'll show you what I'm talking about. Give me just a second. So like with this habit tracker right now, you have the ability to add, update, delete habits without an issue. That is perfect. That's ultimately what we were going after. But where we fall short with the current state of this habit tracker is it's only associated with this one user. So we're going to deploy this to the web in a few minutes or so here. And if you share this URL with anyone, they're going to be able to access the exact same habits that are already entered on this site. That's what they're going to see versus that user having their individual experience. So the way that you establish that individual experience is by identifying the user that's accessing the website. And the best way to do that, there's a few ways you could do it. You can always ask the user to enter in their information and you can use their local storage in order to capture it. We're going to use the luxury of a database, and this is going to be and it's currently a Postgres Neon via Vercel database in order to capture that user that is currently logged in. But if you share this URL once it's deployed with anyone, like I said, they'll be able to see this. And because we haven't identified the user, that kind of defeats the purpose of a habit tracker. It'll just be a wide open tracker that anyone can see, anyone can access, and we all are seeing the same data. When technically, I may be wanting to capture and track something a little different than you. So it wouldn't make sense for us to see the exact same things. Hey, what's going on, man? Long time no see, my friend. Yeah, you can. And you can also use local storage as well too. It works just as good. The only thing about local storage is that when you, depending upon how you're managing your sessions and your cookies, things of that sort, you could run into some issues and open yourself up to some vulnerabilities. And also, you typically don't store those type of sessions locally with the user, but you absolutely can. Google Drive, you could technically do it. And you could also use the hard drive on your computer to technically store and manage or persist your data, I should say. Great question. Yep, you sure can. Mm-mm. So we'll just refresh this to make sure everything is still there as intended. And like I said, this is just a simple CRUD application to get everything started. Works perfectly fine. And we're going to deploy this in a moment to Vercel. And once we deploy it, if I share that URL with someone else, they'll be able to see the exact same habits that I have, but my habits should be specific to me versus, and someone else's habits should be specific to them as well. I don't think so, man. I think you have to have a credit card. I know they have free tiers, but the way it works is based on usage. So you'll have a free tier, and if for some reason you happen to go over that usage, they will build your credit card. That's why I like to go with Vercel. It's a very inexpensive approach, and use the Postgres Neon database. But with Amazon, the AWS, see not Amazon, with the AWS, there is going to be a fee with it. It's not going to let you get around not having a credit card. That's one of the downsides of using it. It's the reason why I don't use it very often is because it can be very pricey, although it is large at scale. And depending upon your project, if you're not getting a return on that investment, it doesn't make a lot of sense to invest that kind of money into their platform when you're not getting a return back. It's just going to be costing you more than you're going to be making. You're hustling backwards, if you will. Yep. Yep, that's the most cost efficient approach. I haven't experienced a lot of others at a personal level. Obviously, at a larger level, sure, but on a personal level, yeah, that's about the most cost efficient I've seen. Get a very generous amount for a lot of usage, if you will. But how you been, man? Long time no see. Man, Java is my favorite. It's what I started with as well. I would recommend it to anyone. Starting with the basics, I learned data structures and algorithms, and then kind of branched into Spring Boot as well. If you got any questions or anything, let me know. I have some on in my lives. About 2.5 years ago, I have some of my school projects that I built. I did those live, just to kind of hold myself accountable and to kind of teach it, since I had to teach it in a classroom setting. Sometimes I didn't speak because I was just a little nervous. But there's quite a few programs that I built in Java, man. That Spring Boot is fun. As a matter of fact, I may use it for another project that I'm going to build after I get this habit tracker going. Basically, looking to I could use it as a back end and use whatever I want as the front end. But Spring Boot is fun. It's fun, man. Absolutely. I enjoy it. I love Java. It's my favorite to write in. Mm-mm-mm. What resources are you using to learn? If you don't mind me asking, are you taking a course of some sort? Um, I use AI a little bit. I tend to code on my own because it can be a little annoying, but I'm starting to use it for some of the UI stuff. To your point, that I don't want to say is boring, but I'm more of a back end kind of guy myself. So if I can get some help with the front end to make it quote unquote pretty, I'll take it. But I care more about the logic. So yeah, I'm starting to use some AI. not a whole lot, but I am starting to use some AI to kind of help me specifically with the front end and all that tailwind CSS and all that stuff that doesn't really bring the same joy and excitement as coding on the back end does. Okay. YouTube and some courses from Udemy. Yeah, you can't go wrong with that, man. Public static void is my favorite, man. I still remember it to this day. I just don't code a lot with it right now. My computer, I just got it replaced, so I probably could put it on this one, but I didn't have the resources available on my hard drive in order for it to function properly. So I kind of moved away from it. But now that you mention it, I might do it because it is fun and a little easier. It's more enterprise acceptable than a React project is. Yeah, I think it's I know it has a lot of benefits, and I know it can probably do a lot more than what I ask it to do. But for the front end, it's perfect for me, man. If I don't have to worry about building the cards and all of these little minuscule features, if AI can help me with it, absolutely. It would be irresponsible of me not to use AI, especially in scenarios where it can help me out versus me having to write the code myself. Heck, and you're right, it probably will make it look a little better, especially if I can give it something to kind of model or give it the kind of the design that I'm looking for so that it doesn't look all cheesy like some of these other AI projects. I think it's a great resource, and I absolutely would use it. I haven't used it in the back end logic too much or with some of the structure because you always want to make sure that you understand it just in case I need to scale it, make changes. If AI did everything for me, I may not have an understanding of it. You usually don't make too many changes to the AI unless you just AI, unless to the front end UI, unless you just want to change the aesthetics. But for the most part, as long as that front end works and the logic works, is secure. That's all the end user really cares about. No one really cares about all the animations and things like that. Usually, too much is going to bog the system down. Then do what you wanted it to do, which is to be something fancy. So yeah, I'm with you. Yep. Frame of motion is what I typically use. Implementing it with Next.js is pretty straightforward and using a template file versus putting it in your layout so you can keep your layouts still server rendered and all that good stuff. But yeah, I use frame of motion, man. And I've kind of gotten into a little bit of app development. I'm actually going to make this a app as well once I have a basic habit tracker that I want to use. I'll give myself a couple days. Maybe I'll have this thing finished by tomorrow or Sunday at the latest. Then I'm going to set up some APIs within the project and add in an Expo app so I can have a app version, also a website version, just to mix it up a little bit and then go with it from there. Right, exactly. And not to say that AI couldn't secure it. You just want to have your hands involved with that to make sure that there are no vulnerabilities. Now, sure, it can write the code. I'm sure it can without an issue, but I would rather structure it myself to make sure that it is secure because that's where all of the sensitive and pertinent information lives on that back end on the server. You absolutely right about that. A responsive nav menu isn't that prevalent, but that user information, that's definitely important. You got to make sure that's on point. Otherwise, you're going to have a disaster on your hand for sure. Sounds good, man. Thanks for stopping by, man. It's always good to hear from you, my friend. Oh, and I got that Discord set up too. I just got to start jumping in there, but I will. And best of luck to you, man. Share your progress with Spring Boot with me. And if you ever want me to code anything or got a questions, just hit me up. I'll be happy to help. All right. Uh, All right. So making sure that we have that relationship is extremely important. That way, when we share the website with someone, it's going to be looking for that user, right? And the habit will be in a relationship with the user. So you may be wondering kind of what behavior are we looking for, or what exactly do we want to experience from the application. So the features are pretty simple. As my friend just mentioned, you technically can leverage AI to kind of help with some of the features, streaks, badges, notifications, all of those fun things that a habit tracker will have, and to enhance the end user experience. But we want to spend our time, at least up front, associating and establishing the behavior of the app that we want, because that's ultimately what's going to drive that application, not so much involved with the features itself. So you want to ask yourself, what exactly are you looking for from this? Do you want to have resets daily? Do you want to be able to track and display streaks back to the user? What happens if the user misses a day? Do you send a notification? The streaks start over? Do you ask them to double up? These are additional features that can enhance the experience, but they don't ultimately impact the core foundation of the app itself. Do we want to send reminders? Do we want to set time zones? Like if we said, hey, you have to update this habit by this time, is that time going to be managed based on our current time zone, or are we going to distinguish it by that user's current time zone? These are all decisions and questions that you have to ask that fall in that behavior umbrella, but these are pleasantries or nice to haves. They don't necessarily define how the project itself is going to work. The other thing you're going to have to care for, that we'll set up throughout the process, is what does the user experience, or what does that user flow look like? Obviously, we're going to have some form of sign up slash sign in process, and we'll be using better off to kind of measure or manage the authentication and authorization for the user. But once the users sign up, what does that look like? Is there an onboarding flow? Do we ask them to create habits then, or do we just redirect them straight to a dashboard? Once they log in, do we redirect them to a dashboard? Do we redirect them to a missed habit? How do we treat that logged in user behavior? We'll also need to create habits. What does a created habit look like? Do we only capture the title, the state? Do we distinguish a color for organization? Do we have it within a calendar view? All of these things are little questions that we'll have to answer along the way as we're building out the application. Do we want the user to see a dashboard immediately, or is that going to be something that is only available with a subscription or a pay for the application, etc.? But what does that look like? Do we want the user to have, as the user has the ability to mark a habit complete, what takes place at that point? This is all that flows within the user experience, and these are things that we have to be prepared for. What progress do we want the user to see? Do we want it to be a 7-day view, a 5-day view, a 3-day view, a 1 month, 2 month view, whatever it is? We have to be able to distinguish that experience and set it up for the user, and it kind of determine, giving the user some flexibility to say, hey, I want to be able to learn how to day trade in 2 weeks. So we now know we have a 2-week timeline that we want the user to have a completion by. So we would just say January 16th, 2 weeks out from the day. How many hours are being spent? Does that user log it? If they don't log it, or if they miss it, do we allow them to update it the next day, or do we send a notification that, hey, you missed the day, so now it is February the 17th instead of the 16th because you missed a day? These are things that we have to think about. They're simple, very effective, very powerful, all are certainly going to impact the end user experience, but we want to make sure that we're designing these things and building it with the purpose, because ultimately this is what's going to drive our application. And then after we've done that, we need to kind of think through the stack. So for this project, the stack is already determined. I'm using Next.js, and I'm going to take advantage of its full stack capabilities. In addition to the UI, its routing, its server logic, just makes a lot of sense. It's simple, easy to use, and as my buddy just mentioned, most importantly, it's cost efficient. So I don't have to worry about these crazy bills as I use different data sources. I'm just going to leverage the backend from Postgres Neon. Another option that I did strongly consider was Convex, and I do intend to build with Convex more. I do enjoy it, but I know that Convex does have a cost mechanism that isn't free, although it does give a real-time experience. It integrates well with Clerk authentication, and of course, Clerk provides the entire suite, so we don't have to worry about anything as it relates to setting up the authentication. You basically just install the packages, add it to the UI, and you have a full-blown authentication system right out of the box that doesn't require any additional code from us. So there are some benefits to it, but I also know that based upon the amount of usage and how frequently you may want to visit this, it's very likely that you could incur a cost by using it because of their habits, and you'll probably be checking them. You will want to check them very frequently and do certain things that require database queries, which is going to be a update or an impact to the database, and that will ultimately impact the financials for you. So we're going to keep it with Postgres and Neon, but that's something that you have to think about. Authentication, I'm using Better Off. I could absolutely use Clerk or one of the other ones. I wouldn't recommend writing it from scratch, even though it's not overly complicated, but that does require more code from you, number one, more logic from you. And although I have confidence that I can certainly write a email username, login, logic, bcrypt from scratch, it's not an issue. If there's a more efficient, better way to go about it, why not leverage what's already out there versus trying to reinvent the wheel? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we're going to leverage Clerk to help us with that. Excuse me, we're going to leverage Better Off, but Clerk came in a very, very close second. And if you would prefer to use that, it's very simple to substitute this out and use that in its place. Want to make sure that you have ownership. As I mentioned, this is going to become something that I will extend to other users. So I will have a admin profile or role. We'll have a user profile, and at some point we'll include some form of a paid subscription. If it is something that users enjoy, whether it be a monthly subscription or a one-time purchase, something along those lines. But again, you want to have ownership within the application, because if you're going to build a SaaS of some sort, everyone can't be at the same role. There has to be someone that has the administrative rights that can kind of supersede and oversee and do those sort of things without everyone having that capability or no one having that capability. And the final thing that we need with this application, with any app that we're building for public consumption, is trust. That's why I just said it makes the most sense just to go ahead and leverage a established, maintain credible authentication provider versus us trying to write it ourselves. Obviously, authentication is going to be the key component to trust, being able to identify that user, but also as the user uses our app, they need to be able to trust that the data will remain there when they log in, whether it be multiple times throughout the day or at night or the next day or whenever it is that they log in. They need to be able to trust that their information is going to be there without having, oh, it may not be there this time, or oh, they don't know what happened, or oh, I can't trust it. Especially once we integrate Stripe. Stripe does a lot of the heavy lifting, but if that user is having bad experiences before we even implement more complexity, we don't want to, it won't be good from an end user perspective. You as a consumer wouldn't want to do business with someone that doesn't have a secure, reliable application that they can trust and utilize whenever they get ready to. So it's going to be very, very important that before we share this with anyone, that we have a secure, trustworthy application that works as we intend. So anytime you're building a application, those are the things that you want to consider. What does that end user experience look like? What does my overall system look like? And making sure that I have the appropriate data modeling set up so that the user can expect what they expect from my website, and we're delivering a safe, secure, and a trustworthy experience. So use this as a foundation for whatever project that you ultimately want to build. I'd love to hear more about it in the comments. Feel free to share those repos and ideas with me. And until next time, I'll see you in the next one.